What is up, everyone? I'm Jeff London. This is the Mediocre Alaskan Podcast, where we are tolerant of weak-minded attitudes that keep people from pursuing new and exciting things in the areas of fitness, outdoors, and general lifestyle. One of the reasons I started this because I was excited about talking with local people and kind of getting their stories so that people get an authentic look at what Alaskans are really like, rather than just what's shown on TV. And then also finding that kind of secret badass in a lot of people. You look at the best in each category or in each lifestyle, and then you kind of think, well, that kind of epitomizes the outdoor person or the hunter or the weightlifter or whatever. But there's a lot of people who really get after it. And if you surround yourself with passionate people who are creative and want to just crush it, that's great. So I like finding people like that and talking to those people. So I'm talking to Travis Peterson from Off the Hook Taxidermy here in Klawock. And I walked into the living room, and there's a huge musk ox right there. And so the first 10 minutes are about the musk ox. But we have some good conversation about taxidermy, a lot of stuff that I didn't know about preparing your fish for taxidermy, things to look for, and then how he got started. That is all coming up, episode 47, Mediocre Alaskan Podcast. Make sure you check out mediocrealaskan.com. Thank you for everybody leaving ratings and reviews on iTunes. Appreciate that. Keep them coming. Here we go, episode 47. So I walk into your living room, and I walk into a muskox. Not a typical decoration piece. Where'd you get it, and how'd that come about?
Well, it was probably 2003, I think. I've been putting in for probably about 10 to 12 years for the muskox on Nunivak Island. Okay. And was finally lucky enough to get drawn for that. And so it's an interesting hunt because as a resident you can go up there and hunt them without a guide or a transporter. But to fly into Macorak on Nunivak Island, what do you to do? So you need a guide or a transporter. I've heard of guys doing it where they've actually flown in dog teams and snow machines and stuff, but the logistics of it, the whole hunting them up there and experiencing village life up there. Yeah, that was the neatest part of it. The first day we got whited out. And, the second day, it was a beautiful day when we started out, and it's from the village, it's clear across the island to where the muskox are. I'm not sure in how many miles it is, but all snow machine. And you could see them, the hunt itself isn't much of a hunt because their defense mechanism, as you know, they get in a circle and defend off any predators. I was hunting with a recurve, to do it, and so we got about 200 yards away, and they had circled up. They seen us coming miles away, heard us miles away probably, and the Inuit guide, he's like, okay, shoot. I said, well, I have to get a little closer than this. Yeah. This recurve. He goes, well, how close? 20 yards would work. Oh, he goes, okay. And so I started belly crawling up there. There's not a tree on that island, and little rocks, and I'm belly crawling up there, and they're milling around and stuff, and they didn't seem too concerned. And I probably went maybe 25 yards, and I hear crunch, crunch, crunch coming up behind me. And the guide, he goes, it's okay to get up and walk. So, okay, I wish you would have told me that to begin with, and it took several attempts to get close enough, and the tough part is I could get into range and they'd do that defense, but they were head on to me, and that took, it took them breaking away a few times. And finally, this big bull and two other bulls broke off from the rest of the herd. And I was false charged, probably 3 times. Oh. And I'd asked the biologist, because you have to take a class before you even hunt them, to make sure you know which ones are bulls and which ones are cows. Mm-hmm. And I asked him, what do you do? He says, well, just stand your ground. And the first time they come charging, snot's blowing out their nose and everything. I'm like, oh man, this is quite an experience. And I started kind of slowly walking back, and of course fell over backwards, and they stopped like 20, 30 yards out. But yeah, it was a one arrow, and he only went probably about 40 yards, and it expired, and that was it. And yeah, just being out there, and I was stuck there after that probably for a week and a half due to weather. And that gets interesting.
Yeah.
Being stuck in the village. But
well, how do you tell the difference between male and female?
With the bosses, the horny part on top of the head, the females really don't have that real tough horn part, and their actual horns are a lot thinner, and just mainly that top boss part of the head up there. And of course, this is reaching back into trying to remember all the things that told us.
That's right.
And the other thing was shot placement too. It was, you see this big hairy thing.
Yeah.
It's like, man, where are the vitals on this thing? And following up those front, you had to follow up the front legs, and kind of judge back, because you could just barely see when they're, in pretty deep snow.
Yeah.
So that was a tough part too. And the wind carried my arrow a little bit, and it shot back just a little bit far, but it took the back two lungs out and stuff. So, yeah, and the meat, wow. I've had meat from all over, and I'll put this muskox meat up against anything. It was so good. It was delicious. And the biologist said he was probably 800 pounds on the hoof.
Jeez.
And I left a lot of rib meat and stuff with the guide and whatnot, just because it was so much to fly back, but still brought back a few hundred pounds of meat. So it was excellent stuff.
So it's just tundra grazing until the winter, and then are they still able to get through the snow toward anything?
I think so. Yeah, I believe that you could, when we were watching them, they were definitely digging through the snow, and I think looking for those lichens and stuff or whatever.
Hard to sustain something that big if you're just feeding during the summer during this. So
yeah, it's amazing, that, and I didn't realize until I started, putting in for the hunts and stuff. I always thought they were part of the bovine family, but they're actually part of the goat family. They're closely related to the mountain goat than anything. Okay. So that was kind of interesting too.
Okay. Speaking of judging, I went on a goat hunt 2 years ago, and I'd never been on a goat hunt before.
Oh, wow.
And just trying to differentiate between billies and nannies, especially if they're solo. If you look, you got the little ones with it, you can tell. But you're looking through the spotting scope, and you're trying to gauge length of these horns that are pretty small. Like, is that 9.5 or is it 10? It was crazy.
Yeah.
But my buddy ended up getting a good one. I didn't have the tag for it. It's the one that's right behind Catch a Kid.
Oh, okay, sure.
But yeah, it was a cool hunt, but just totally different.
Yeah.
Deer hunting, you look at it, and the one you got on the wall there has a fixed amount of points, got some nice eye guards.
Right, you kind of know,
Yeah, it's a yes or no in a second. There's no, is it?
Yeah, I would guess you have to really look at a lot of them. That was the same way. I didn't care. I was just happy to be drawn and be able to do this hunt, because I knew it was going to be a once-in-a-lifetime thing, even though I've been drawn since then and haven't had the funds to go, because it's probably one of the more expensive hunts as a resident to do. I think the tag for a resident's $500. Oof. And just the logistics of getting there, and getting a transporter or a guide, it's pretty expensive, and then getting the meat and everything back home.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't care the size and anything. I knew I had to shoot a bull, and any bull would have done. I didn't have plans of getting to do a life-size mount. But when I got there, he's like, he pointed out the bulls, of course, and there was when we first got I think it was a herd of probably about 30, 40 muskox total. And you could definitely tell he was the big daddy of the herd, and so you might as well go for the big one.
If he's there.
And the biologist said that he was probably about an 8-year-old bull, and it was probably his last winter. And so, and they have to take out so many muskox out of that herd to sustain them throughout the
Yeah.
the year up there. And when I told him I was hunting with a recurve, he just kind of rolled his eyes. He said, "Man," he goes, "I have to take out, I have to have these certain amount of muskox dead. That's why we have to draw." And so, yeah, he was nervous, which made me more nervous.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, he made Pope and Young. I don't remember the score or anything. Actually, a friend, I didn't mount this muskox. A friend of mine, Bob Oak, in Anchorage, he was doing taxidermy part-time, and he did deer and a few of my other mammals. He gave me a smoking good deal, and I was just planning on getting maybe a shoulder mount, and he talked me into, doing a life size. He goes, "You just have to do them justice. You have to do a life size, you know."
Yeah.
And I agree. They are pretty impressive looking mount.
Yeah. Well, that's a good transition. Do you deal with fish? Like, that is your primary, so it's kind of the art sort of, you'd probably consider yourself an artist, because there's a lot more to it as opposed to the animal mounts.
It's funny, Jeff, you say that an artist. I don't consider myself an artist, and I probably shouldn't say this because I don't know who will be listening. I couldn't draw you a stick figure, and so it's fun. It is an art to be able to do fish, and I know a ton of taxidermists that do everything else except fish. They're intimidated by doing fish. They're like, "Oh man, I have no artistic ability. I can't do fish," and that's how I kind of felt when I first started doing fish. And I was just like, man, I couldn't draw you a fish on paper. And I guess to jump ahead a little bit, how I got started was I was started in, like most people, most taxidermists, as a collector. Man, that would be neat to be able to have this mounted, or have this on the wall. This is a true trophy. And so the very first fish that I had done, I caught a big yellow eye, which is over on the wall on the north end of Q Island, and it was 33 inches long, 30-inch girth. I never did get a weight on it. And everybody said, they're like, "Oh, wow, that's the biggest yellow eye I've seen around here," and it was neat because we actually caught it in less than 100 feet of water. It was early spring when they were spawning, and so she was, big belly, full up, and it was very impressive, and it fought, unlike most yellow eyes, they fight that first 20 feet, and then the air bladder goes.
Yeah.
And so got on board, and I was like, yeah, that'd be neat. I have the money to maybe get this mounted. And this is back before the internet, and so I was calling several taxidermists, and they said, "No, I don't do skin mounts on yellow eye. You'll have to do a reproduction." I was like, "Yeah, that sounds great. I'll do a reproduction." Well, there's no reproductions that big. You'll have to do a custom mold. Okay, and I started asking people that did custom molds, and they're like, they gave me prices that were way out of my price range to be able to do. And I finally got a hold of a guy over in Eastern Canada that had a mold making business for fish, doing replicas, Ron Reynolds. And he said, "Well, I'm really looking for a big yellow eye." He said, I'll do that fish and give you a good price, if I can have the mold of it and stuff. And super. And I probably shouldn't be naming names, but he's retired and gone now. But anyway, so 2 years go by. I forget about the darn fish. And I mean, it took quite a bit of money from sending it from remote Baranof Island in Alaska to the eastern side of Canada, frozen fish. Probably cost close to as much as I paid to get it mounted. But I finally get this thing back, and it's a big yellow eye, and I'm looking at it, and I go, I was all excited, I didn't know. But something looked off, the eye looked off. The color, it looked like maybe it was done with maybe the orange rattle can flagging marker spray paint. just blasted orange, and so I was like, well, yeah, I was still happy with it.
Yeah.
I caught that fish, even though it was a replica. It was molded from my fish, and I didn't care, didn't know much about it. The second thing I had mounted, I caught a big halibut. It was close to 250, that halibut tail over there, and sent it off to, I won't name names, to somebody in Alaska. And they're like, oh, yeah, we'll do it. And I was like, okay, you want me to send the tail? Yeah, send the tail. So I paid the money to send the tail. A couple years go by. I start calling. Where's my halibut tail? Oh, I'm working on it. And you'll get that excuse from a lot of taxidermists. I'm working on it. Yeah, bull. So time went by, and it was almost close to 3 years.
Wow. And
I get this thing finally in the mail, and it's spray painted black on one side and white on the other.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, that's not what it looked like. And to come to find out years later that all halibut on the white side, the markings on the white side are all different. It's almost like a fingerprint. No two are alike on the white side. And so I tell my customers, take really good pictures of at least the white side to show those different markings.
Yeah.
And some of them have really, really interesting, cool markings on the white side. And this one did. But it was all spray painted white. And I was like, really, how hard is this?
Yeah.
And I measured it out, and it wasn't my tail to begin with. And it wasn't even a replica of the size of my tail. And so I just chalked it up as, well, live and learn. And that's how I got into it. And I was like, I bought books and videos, and this was when I was working as a fish culturist up at Hidden Falls Hatchery on Baranoff. And, a lot of people, that's how they learn, through the books and videos, and now online. All the information in the world's online now. But I was like, struggling a little bit, never used airbrushes, and did this kind of thing. And I said, man, to really learn, I really need to seek out an instructor. And I had money at the time and time to go and learn from somebody, either a taxidermy school, which there's several around the United States, or an individual. So I seeked out the best fish taxidermist, in my opinion, in the world, and that's Rick Crane over in New Hampshire. And he's been teaching for a while, one-on-one classes. I said, man, what a better way to learn than one-on-one.
Right.
And so I went back to New Hampshire and studied under him for about 3 weeks. And it was putting in 17-hour days back there.
Wow.
And this was before he was married to his wife now, so we're both, didn't care, and we were burning the midnight oil working on fish. And he taught me that your best teacher in doing fish is the actual fish itself. And working as a fish culturist, I knew what a fish looked like. I knew the parts of it. I knew the anatomy of the fish. And that's what you won't find in a lot of other taxidermists in general, is that they don't really focus on the anatomy. They could paint a fish to look like a fish. I could paint one species of fish to look like another species of fish, but the anatomy's not right, and you'll look at that fish and go, something's wrong with this. And so and that was the best way for me to learn. And so since then, he's actually made trips to Alaska. And he plans on coming hopefully this year and do a little bit more learning on my part, because it's constantly learning. For one, the fish are different, and there's new challenges. The color phases of fish, like the cohos I showed you earlier. That was in that stage of, they're not bright fish. They've been in the river for a little while. The male's a little bit darker than the female because they come first into the river and stuff.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
And so, yeah, it's fun. Am I getting rich at doing this? No, no. It's definitely a passion of labor, love there. So,
when you were back in New Hampshire, what types of fish are you working on? Because I think when I think of New Hampshire, I think of trout. It's a really pretty type trout. But how did that prepare you for doing yellow eye up here or quillback or any of those sort of things?
What I did was I actually took a little. I was working over here. I just started working in Ketchikan for Sarah. And so he told me to bring, as many species of fish out that I could, and fish that I want to work on, fish that I would be working on in this particular area, Southeast Alaska. And so I brought a little coho jack that I pulled out of the raceway over there at Whitman Lake, and I brought a little king jack that I pulled out, and then I had caught a pink salmon, a humpy, and spawning, and froze that earlier in the year, and for this class. And what else did I do? I did a reproduction steelhead in spawning colors, which I always, that was always my dream, to do a nice big steelhead. And I wanted to do one that was 36 inches, to show people what true 36 inches looks like.
Oh, yeah.
and how unicorn they are around here. So, so we worked on fish that I would be working on here. And I tell all my customers, when they come here, I talk with them over the phone or over the internet, that, a really good fish taxidermist can do any fish in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I've done fish that, I'm not familiar with. I've done some fish that I've never seen in my life and was able to find pictures of the fish that the customers didn't have pictures. Mm-hmm. And so, people get hung up on, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but they get hung up on, well, I'm in Alaska and I need to have a taxidermist in Alaska do my fish. I tell everybody to look around, shop around, look at my work, look at other people's work. It's their hard-earned money that they're spending. I know I've been bit, So I tell them to look around, but a really good fish taxidermist can do any fish. Mm-hmm. But make sure to look at their work, make sure to tell from their work. And so, that's a big part of it. I get several calls a year. I want you to do my fish. That's great. I'm more than happy to do your fish. And I tell them, I go, well, the shipping, I'm going to have to send my fish to wherever you're from. And the majority of my business is actually out of state, out of Alaska. And they do it. And like you seen the 2 cohos in there, they were caught over on the East Coast. They weren't even caught in Alaska. So, I get clients from all over. But, I tell them all up front, what it's going to be.
Yeah. So if I catch a 50-pound king and I bring it to you, or how would I go about getting that done?
Yeah, there's a few different options. There's skin mount, traditional skin mounts to do. There's reproductions that all I would need is measurements of a length and a girth. And the girth is measured right in front of the dorsal fin in the widest part of the fish. And the other option is actually to do a custom mold and cast of the fish. So the three options. To do a skin mount, and I tell everybody that skin mounts are just fine. A lot of the problems on king salmon is when you catch them, as you know, I mean, as soon as you bring that fish up to the surface, that thing's just throwing scales.
Yeah,
I mean, scales are going everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm not a magic person, you know. I can't, people bring me, you know, things with, you know, they've gutted the fish. Don't ever gut the fish. You know, we're not the same thing with animals, you know. Make sure and talk to your taxidermist before you do anything, because a lot of those things are hard to do. But on my skin mounts, pretty much everything up here in Alaska, I use a reproduction head. I'll either mold the head or buy a head, usually mold it if I have the fish to do a skin mount, of course. And I also make molds and casts of the fins, because that's where a lot of your greases and stuff are, and that's where it's going to cause you problems later on. I do a lot of restorations of fish, and I'm sure you've seen old mounts hanging, you know, all over Alaska, and they get the big banana-looking fish,
yeah,
and they're all yellow now, you know,
yeah,
because they're leaching grease and stuff, and way back when they didn't know, and a lot of them used the real heads and stuff and didn't get out all that stuff you need to get out that's going to cause you problems later on. And so on a skin mount, and I have this, I think, on my website of how to care for the fish. The best thing that you could do is to try to eliminate, you know, losing those scales. I get a lot of the guides here that just throw the fish in the fish box with everybody else's fish and is flopping around in there and losing scales, the same way with rockfish. You know, the best way out there, if it's possible, to separate that fish and either put it in kind of a ice water, you know, but these things aren't possible all the time. When I go to catch a fish to mount or to mold, I actually carry borax laundry detergent with me, and I'll take the borax and I'll smother the whole fish in that, and what that does is it locks down the scales, it protects the fish. And you can do this when you get the fish home too. You know, borax is cheap at the grocery store, and just totally cover the fish. And what I like to do is I'll lay out wax paper on a board and lay that fish in the freezer flat, and being careful with the fins to lay the fins against the body, and then freeze that fish. And then once that fish is frozen, take it out and double wrap it in big garbage sacks, heavy-duty garbage sacks, and try to get all the air out as you can. Again, being careful of the fins and everything, not to break the fins, because they'll break like ice once they're frozen. But you know, probably in the last 4 to 5 years, 95% of my work has been reproductions. For whatever reason, they're getting more and more popular. Whether it be in, you know, myth that skin mounts are terrible, they're not. You know, done properly, they're fine. And so, but people like, you know, up here that catch their once in a lifetime king salmon, and the price of king salmon down south, you want to eat that fish.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? And so a picture and a length and a girth, I don't need a weight. It's fine if you get one. I mean, you're going to kill the fish anyways in that sense. That's fine. You know, it's just one more thing I could go by to determine the size. I tell a lot of people that everybody with their phones today, you know, they're fancy cameras, you know, than high-dollar cameras nowadays. And to take pictures as soon as that fish is caught, because once a fish is taken out of the water, the colors automatically change. the blood's going, the oils underneath the scales, they're starting to disappear. And so it's really important to try to get and nowadays you can take as many pictures and just delete them. I'll delete them later on, but the more pictures I have, the better. Close-up pictures. Almost all cameras now have macro, sets and stuff, and the more pictures, the better. And then the other thing is a lot of people come up to Alaska or anywhere else in the world and release fish, and you could tell, if you have your fishing rod next to the fish that you caught that you're releasing, you could go by the length and stuff. And there's a lot of reproductions out there. Not always, you can't always match exactly what they are. I had a person call a few years ago, and they caught the Alaska state record coho up in Icy Strait. And they called me, well, I want to get a reproduction done. Okay. I go, how big was it? And they told me, I can't remember exactly now, but there's no reproductions. It's a Alaska state record. What did you do with the fish? We ate it. The state record, you just ate the state record. Wow. And so I had to turn down the job. There was nothing I could do to match that size. It was huge, and so things to think about, on that. And then the other thing to do is, like I said, the custom making a mold of that fish and casting that fish. And there's species of fish that I'm always looking for to add to my reproduction, my catalog of molds. And so, I'll ask a person if they caught the fish, what condition the fish is in, and possibly, maybe give them a little bit of a break of being able to mold that fish. I do a lot of halibut tails because I found very few people that their wives especially won't let them put a 200-pound halibut on.
Probably not. Yeah, that's the entire wall. Yeah.
And I get the calls every year. Again, shipping becomes a factor.
Yeah.
I told one guy in Florida, he caught one up by Pelican, and they're killing some huge halibut up there, unfortunately. But he caught one, and he wanted to do a full mount, and it was close to 400. And I said, there's a reproduction out there that I can lengthen and make the girth bigger on it, no problem. I said, but the shipping to Florida,
it's crazy, yeah.
I'm gonna have to ship it barge and then by truck, which I do a lot of fish. I do a lot of my big king salmon that way. So the shipping alone is going to be, close to $1,000 to do it. And I told him of a friend that I have down in Florida, and he got a hold of them, and they did the fish for him.
Nice.
But yeah, so it's so all the things to think about. Yeah.
But how long does it take for compare a coho to a halibut tail, as far as hours, as far as detail? How much does it take? Well,
to tell you that I've never, and I have a number in my mind of how long it takes me. Of course, doing a bright coho is going to take longer because how I paint my fish, I do mostly hand painting on my fish, very little airbrushing and stuff. I do use airbrush, but very little. And so on a bright coho, I'll paint the scales 2 to 3 times each, and I've never attempted to try to count the scales on a salmon, and I don't know if anybody has. I'm sure somebody has, but I've never determined how long it takes me, because then I'm going to figure out how much I make.
No, you don't want to do it.
I could go to Mexico and work at a sweatshop. So.
Yeah.
But what I do, right now, we're just starting the season, and I'm finishing up the last of last year's stuff. And so right now I'm about 7 to 8 months out to do any job. That's why I tell if somebody calls for a halibut tail or a coho or any other fish. And it depends on how busy I get throughout the summer. I try to keep it with under a year. And if I get over that yearly, then I'll just start, sending people somewhere else. Because it's a terrible long time to wait, to get your mount back. I know some other fish taxidermists that are backlogged 2-3 years right now for fish. And I'm just a one-man show here, And most of your fish-only taxidermists are one-man studios. So I don't know, some nights I'll be out there 2:00 in the morning painting scales, going, "What in the heck am I doing?"
But you have to wait for the paint to dry and the process, so it's not really a start to finish. There's same thing with an animal. You have to get the hide fleshed out. You got to send it to get it tanned and then get it back, and so it's a longer process. It's not, if I really hustle, I can get this done in 42 hours. It's that over a long period of time of the detail.
Yeah, and I have people that call, and and I do offer a rush service. It's about double, but you can only do so much. Reproductions, if I don't have the actual mold of the fish and have to send to one of my suppliers that have that mold, they could be up to 3 months out just to get me the reproduction here, and that's to send it anywhere. So I could cut down about half the time, but it's double the price on doing that, because I try to, as the jobs come in, that's the order that I work on them on, and most people, once they hear double the price, they okay, well, I can wait is twice as much longer. So but so it's and I work on several fish at a time, because a lot of the times, like you said, you are waiting for paint to dry, you're waiting for lacquer to evaporate, you're waiting for the epoxies to set, and so there's a lot of waiting, and so I have several projects going at once.
About how many fish have you done?
Oh boy, total? Oh man, I don't even know. I've never kept track of how many I've done total.
Talking dozens, hundreds?
Oh, hundreds. Yeah. Yeah. I started doing it as a hobby, like I told you, when I was at Hidden Falls and wanted to learn after getting those mounts. And that was about 2002, 2003. And I've been over on the island now doing this full time as my primary job since about 2010.
Okay.
And before that, I was doing it part-time over in Ketchikan for a few years.
Okay. What's your favorite fish to do?
Oh, wow. Halibut, because they're pretty basic. Boy, I don't know. I think they're kind of, each one's a challenge. I don't know if I have a favorite. I love doing the salmon. Then again, I get a fish that I've never done before, and that becomes my favorite. Probably the most unique fish I've done up here is a Pacific pomfret. I don't know if you've heard of that fish.
No, okay.
Neither have I. A local gill netter here had caught it on the north end of the island, and he called and left a message on my phone. He says, "I have this Pacific pomfret I want to get mounted." I had to sit there and listen over and over to the message saying, what did he say? What kind of fish? Finally looked it up, and sure enough, Pacific pomfret. And so he brought the fish by, and I'm like, I've never heard of this fish, And the more I dug into it, they used to have an experimental commercial fishery for them out in the open ocean, and they're a midwater fish. They look like a tropical fish, Trevilla. Trying to think of the other fish they look like. They're kind of like a dime-shaped type of a fish, really sharp little teeth. And so, not knowing what that fish was about, and it was really tough to find any information online about them. I didn't want to do a skin mount, right off the bat. And I told him it's best if we made a mold of this fish. No one had a mold out there of the fish.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a reproduction that I could buy, that I could find. Maybe there is. But so I made a mold of the fish, and we did a pedestal mount. And I still have the fish in my freezer, planning on doing a skin mount of it for him. But yeah, that was a pretty unique fish, and it was fun just because it was, I had never seen that fish before, and the only thing I had to go by was very few pictures online of the fish. That I found some Atlantic pomfrets and stuff, and down in Asia, it's a fish that you can find in the market and stuff, but very few pictures. So, and I try to, like I said, that's when people catch the fish to take as many pictures. I know what every fish looks like, but I'll get thrown a curveball sometimes. Yeah. And sometimes people will have a fish and they're like, oh, well, they'll try to explain to me how it looked. I go, well, did you take pictures? No, I didn't take pictures. Okay. And so, I have a huge catalog of I call it fish porn, because I just millions and millions of pictures of fish. So you don't necessarily have to. I get phone calls and I get jobs of people that have restaurants or lodges, and they want a king salmon. Okay, do you want a bright one? You want a spawn? I don't care. Just a king salmon. Okay, a bright one. So I do lots of those.
Cool. Well, where can people find you? How can they follow you? How can they get in contact with you?
You can look me up, I guess, if you just look up on Google Off the Hook Taxidermy. It's www.offthehoooktaxidermy.com is my website. I think all I got is Instagram on social media right now. I keep being told by all these people, oh, you need a Facebook, you need this, you need that. Man, that's the last thing I need right now. Yeah. I'm trying. That, or you could just call me direct at 907-965-4779.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Appreciate your time here, and I'll let you get back to work.
All right, thanks.
That will do it for this episode. Make sure you check out the MediocreAlaskan.com for more content and next week's episode. Talk to you next time.